I still remember the day I walked into that bank, my heart racing with anticipation. I had spent hours preparing for the interview, researching the company, practicing my responses to common questions, and ironing my suit until it was crisp and perfect. I was determined to make a good impression, to show them that I was the right person for the job. As I entered the building, I was struck by its grandeur. The high ceilings, the marble floors, the sleek glass walls, it was a temple of commerce, a place where deals were made and fortunes were built. I felt a surge of excitement, a sense of possibility as I made my way to the reception desk. The receptionist, a polished woman with a friendly smile, greeted me warmly and led me to a conference room on the second floor. I took a seat, trying to calm my nerves, and waited for the interviewer to arrive. He was a tall, imposing figure with a stern expression and a firm handshake. He introduced himself as the bank's HR manager, and we launched into the interview. At first, it seemed to be going well. I answered his questions confidently, highlighting my skills and experience. But as the interview wore on, I began to feel a growing sense of unease. The HR manager's questions were becoming increasingly pointed, his tone more critical. And then the blow came. "I'm afraid we're looking for someone with a more professional image," he said, his eyes scanning my body with disdain. "Your weight may be a problem for our clients." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I tried to speak to defend myself, but my voice caught in my throat. The HR manager's words were like a knife, slicing through my confidence and leaving me feeling exposed and vulnerable. As I left the bank, I felt defeated. The HR manager's harsh words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of my inadequacy. I wondered if I would ever be able to overcome my struggles with obesity, to prove myself in a world that seemed determined to hold me back. But even in the midst of that crushing despair, a spark of determination flared to life within me. I knew that I couldn't give up, not yet. I had to find a way to rise above this rejection, to prove to myself and to the world that I was more than just my weight. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of my journey. The rejection at the bank was just the spark that would ignite a fire of transformation within me, a fire that would propel me to heights I never thought possible. As I walked out of the bank, I couldn't help but feel like I'd hit rock bottom. The rejection stung, and the words of the interviewer still lingered in my mind like a festering wound. "We're looking for someone with a more professional image." It was a polite way of saying I was too fat, too unattractive, too unacceptable. I wandered aimlessly through the streets, feeling like a ghost hovering on the fringes of society. People passed by, their faces a blur, as I struggled to come to terms with the harsh reality. I was 25 years old and my life was going nowhere. But as I walked, something inside me began to stir. A spark of defiance, a flame of determination flickered to life. I realized that I had two choices. I could let this rejection define me, or I could use it as a catalyst for change. I thought back to all the times I'd tried to diet, to exercise, to fit into the mold of what society deemed acceptable. But it was never about me, it was about trying to please others. This time it was different. This time it was about taking control of my life, of my body, of my future. I started small, with short walks around the block, gradually increasing the distance and intensity. I began to explore healthy eating, experimenting with new recipes and flavors. And as the weeks went by, I started to notice a change. Not just in my body, but in my mind. I felt more confident, more energized, more alive. It was during one of these walks that I stumbled upon a small business seminar. Out of curiosity, I stepped inside, and what I heard changed everything. The speaker was talking about entrepreneurship, about taking risks, about turning passions into careers. Something resonated deep within me. I felt a sense of excitement, of possibility that I'd never experienced before. As I listened, I began to see the world in a different light. I realized that I didn't have to be bound by the conventional 9-to-5 job. I could create my own path, my own success. The seed of entrepreneurship was planted, and I knew that I had to nurture it to help it grow. I left the seminar with a newfound sense of purpose. I was no longer just a rejected job applicant. I was a potential business owner, an innovator, a game changer. The question was, what would I do next? What would spark my entrepreneurial spirit and set me on the path to success? I still remember the day I decided to take the leap and start my own business. The weight loss journey had not only transformed my body, but it had also given me a newfound confidence in my abilities. I was determined to prove to myself and everyone else that I was more than just my weight. As I sat in my small office, Surrounded by nothing but a few pieces of furniture and a laptop, I felt a sense of excitement and nervousness. I had always been passionate about finance, and I had a vision for a company that would provide innovative solutions to individuals and businesses. But I had no idea where to start. I spent countless hours researching, networking, and learning from my mistakes. I faced numerous challenges and setbacks, from skeptical investors to difficult clients. There were times when I doubted myself, when I felt like giving up and returning to the comfort of a 9-to-5 job. But something inside me refused to quit. I remember the first time I landed a major client. It was a small business owner who was looking for a unique financial solution. I spent hours working on the proposal, pouring my heart and soul into it. When I presented it to the client, I was nervous but confident. And when they agreed to work with me, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and accomplishment. That was just the beginning. Slowly but surely, my business started to take off. I hired a team of talented individuals who shared my vision. And together, we worked tirelessly to build a reputation as one of the leading financial firms in the industry. I was proud of what we had achieved, but I knew that it was only the beginning. As I looked around my office, now bustling with activity, I couldn't help but think about the bank that had rejected me all those years ago. I wondered what they would think if they knew that the same person they had deemed unworthy of a job was now a successful entrepreneur, making waves in the financial world. Little did I know, our paths would cross again soon, and this time the outcome would be very different. I still remember the day my business finally took off. It was like a switch had been flipped and suddenly everything was falling into place. The long hours, the late nights, the endless cups of coffee, it had all paid off. My company was thriving, and I was making more money than I ever thought possible. As my bank account grew, so did my confidence. I started to invest in other ventures, diversifying my portfolio and making smart, calculated risks. It wasn't long before I became known in the business world as a shrewd and savvy investor. People would come to me for advice, seeking my insight and expertise. I have to admit, it felt good to be respected and admired by my peers. But there was one thing that still lingered in the back of my mind, the bank that had rejected me all those years ago. I had never forgotten the humiliation and embarrassment I felt that day. And now, as a millionaire investor, I had the means to do something about it. I started to make discreet inquiries about the bank, studying its financials and looking for any weaknesses. It wasn't long before I discovered that the bank was struggling, hemorrhaging money and desperate for a lifeline. I saw an opportunity, and I pounced. I began to secretly acquire shares in the bank, building a sizable stake. My plan was to become a major player, to have a seat at the table and make my presence known. And then, when the time was right, I would make my move. But for now, I would bide my time, watching and waiting. The business world was a game of chess, and I was ready to make my next move. The question was, what would the bank do when they found out that the obese man they had once rejected was now the one holding the reins? I still remember the day I walked into that bank, my head held high, my confidence soaring. It was the same bank where I had been rejected for a job just a few years ago, solely because of my weight. But now I was a millionaire investor, and I had the power to change the fate of this struggling institution. As I entered the bank's headquarters, I could feel the eyes of the employees on me. They were a mix of curiosity and suspicion, unsure of what to make of this stranger who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. I smiled to myself, knowing that I was about to turn their world upside down. I was greeted by the bank's CEO, a man who looked like he had been through a war. His eyes were sunken, his face pale, and his handshake weak. I could sense the desperation emanating from him, the feeling of a man who had run out of options. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're in a bit of a bind here." I nodded sympathetically, taking a seat in the conference room. The CEO began to explain the bank's situation, the struggles they had been facing, and the reasons why they were on the verge of collapse. I listened intently, my mind racing with numbers and strategies. When he finished, I leaned forward, a smile spreading across my face. "I think I can help you," I said, my voice filled with confidence. "But I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to need a significant amount of control, and I'm going to need it now." The CEO looked at me, a mixture of hope and fear in his eyes. He knew that he had no other choice, that I was the only one who could save his bank. He nodded, and we began to discuss the terms of the deal. As we shook hands, I couldn't help but think of the interviewer who had rejected me all those years ago, the one who had told me that I wasn't the right fit for the bank. I wondered what he would say if he knew that I was now the one calling the shots. I didn't have to wait long to find out. As I was leaving the conference room, I saw him standing in the hallway, a look of shock on his face. He had clearly heard the news, and he couldn't believe it. "Ah, mister," I said, pretending to forget his name. "I see you're still working here. That's great." He stuttered, trying to find the right words. "See, congratulations," he managed to stammer. "I had no idea." I smiled, a sweet sense of revenge washing over me. "I'm sure you didn't," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But don't worry, I'm not here to hold grudges. I'm here to save this bank and make a lot of money in the process." He looked at me, a mixture of shame and admiration in his eyes. He knew that I had proven him wrong, that I was more than capable of succeeding in this industry. And I knew that I had finally gotten the last laugh. As I walked through the bank's doors, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. It had been months since I'd invested in the struggling institution, and the transformation was nothing short of remarkable. The once dreary lobby was now bustling with activity, the sound of laughter and chatter filling the air as employees and customers alike went about their day. I was greeted with warm smiles and nods of recognition as I made my way to the conference room. The bank's employees had grown to appreciate my expertise and guidance, and it was clear that they were grateful for the second chance I'd given them. I took a seat at the head of the table, surrounded by the bank's leadership team, and we dove into the day's agenda. The numbers were staggering. Deposits were up, loans were being repaid on time, and the bank's overall financial health was stronger than ever. I listened intently as the team discussed the latest developments, my mind racing with ideas for further growth and improvement. As the meeting drew to a close, I couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the humiliation of being rejected for a job due to my weight, to the thrill of returning as the bank's savior, it had been a wild ride. And yet, as I looked around the room at the faces of my colleagues and friends, I knew that it had all been worth it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. I was in high demand, speaking at industry events and conferences, sharing my insights and expertise with anyone who would listen. The media took notice, and soon I was being interviewed by major news outlets, my name and face becoming synonymous with success and leadership. It was a surreal experience, to say the least. I had always known that I had the potential to make a difference, but I had never imagined that it would happen on such a grand scale. As I stood on stage, microphone in hand, looking out at a sea of expectant faces, I felt a sense of pride and purpose that I had never felt before. And yet, as the applause died down and I made my way back to my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to come. The bank was thriving, but I knew that there were still challenges ahead. The industry was constantly evolving, and we would need to stay ahead of the curve in order to remain competitive. As I scanned the room, my eyes met those of my colleagues and peers. We had come a long way, but we were just getting started. The question on everyone's mind was, what's next? As I stood in the grand lobby of the bank's headquarters, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. The transformation was complete, and the once struggling institution was now thriving. The board of directors, who had once shunned me because of my weight, now looked at me with admiration and respect. They offered me a leadership role, and I accepted without hesitation. I became a key figure in the industry, known for my innovative ideas and my commitment to promoting positivity and self-acceptance. I used my platform to spread a message that I had learned the hard way, that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance. I remember the first industry event I attended as a leader. I walked into the crowded room, my head held high, and my confidence radiating from every pore. The whispers and stares that I had once endured were now replaced with smiles and nods of recognition. People came up to me, eager to shake my hand and congratulate me on my success. As I took the stage to give my speech, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I looked out at the sea of faces and began to speak, my words pouring out from the heart. I talked about the importance of self-acceptance and self-love. I shared my own story of struggle and perseverance, and of the lessons I had learned along the way. The room was captivated, hanging on my every word. I could see the emotion in people's eyes, the nods of agreement, and the tears of understanding. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. As I finished my speech, the room erupted in applause. I was mobbed by people who wanted to thank me, to hug me, and to tell me how much my words had meant to them. I was overwhelmed, but in a good way. I had never felt so seen, so heard, and so understood. And yet, As I basked in the glow of my newfound success, I couldn't help but wonder, how would my message resonate with others? Would it be enough to inspire real change, or would it fall on deaf ears? I knew that I had a long journey ahead of me, but for the first time in my life, I felt ready for whatever came next. As I stood on that stage, looking out at the sea of faces before me, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come. From the obese kid who was rejected at a bank interview to the millionaire investor who saved that very same bank, my journey had been nothing short of incredible. But as I began to share my story with the audience, I knew that this wasn't just about me. It was about the countless others out there who were struggling to find their place in the world. I started a mentorship program, determined to pay it forward and help others achieve their own success. I took on mentees from all walks of life, sharing my knowledge and experience with them and guiding them every step of the way. And as I watched them grow and flourish, I knew that I had made a real difference. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to reach a wider audience, to inspire others to chase their dreams and never give up. So I wrote a book, pouring my heart and soul into the pages. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The response was overwhelming, with readers reaching out to me from all over the world to share their own stories and thank me for mine. Before I knew it, I was in demand as a speaker and author. I traveled to conferences and book signings, sharing my message with anyone who would listen. And as I looked out at the crowds, I saw the impact that my words were having. I saw the tears in people's eyes, the determination on their faces, and the hope in their hearts. It was a truly humbling experience, and one that I would never forget. I had come a long way since that fateful bank interview, but I knew that this was just the beginning. I had a message to share, and I was determined to share it with the world. But as I stood on that stage, basking in the applause and adoration of the crowd, I couldn't help but wonder, what's next? I still remember the day I walked into that bank, hoping to land a job, only to be rejected because of my weight. Who would have thought that years later, I'd be the one walking into that same bank as a millionaire investor, ready to save it from financial ruin? Life has a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? As I sit here today, reflecting on my journey, I'm struck by the realization that every experience, no matter how difficult or painful, has led me to where I am today. Being rejected by that bank was a turning point in my life. It forced me to look inward, to confront my own biases and limitations, and to find a new sense of purpose. I think back to all the struggles I faced, the late nights spent working on my business, the early mornings spent exercising and trying to get healthy. It wasn't easy, but it was all worth it. Because in the end, it wasn't just about achieving success. It was about becoming the best version of myself. As I look around me now, I see people who are struggling just like I was. They're facing their own challenges, their own doubts and fears. And I want them to know that they're not alone. I want them to know that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always hope. That's why I continue to share my story, to inspire and motivate others. I want to help them see that they too can overcome any obstacle, that they too can achieve their dreams. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. I think about the power of self-reflection and personal growth. It's amazing how much we can learn from our own experiences, how much we can grow and evolve as individuals. And I realize that's what this journey has taught me, that the greatest investment I'll ever make is in myself. So, as I look to the future, I know that there's still so much to be done. There are still so many challenges to overcome, so many obstacles to navigate, but I'm not afraid. I'm excited, because I know that no matter what comes next, I'll be ready. I'll be ready to face whatever life throws my way, armed with the knowledge and the determination to succeed. And that's the greatest takeaway from my story. It's not about the money or the success or the accolades. It's about the journey itself. It's about the growth, the learning, the becoming. That's what it's all about. I still remember the day I walked out of that bank, my head held high despite the rejection I had just faced. They said I wasn't a good fit, that my obesity made me unworthy of a chance. But I proved them wrong. I proved everyone wrong. As I look back on my journey, I am filled with a sense of pride and accomplishment. From that humiliating interview to becoming the millionaire investor who saved the very same bank, my story is one of triumph and inspiration. I think about all the people I've met along the way, all the lives I've touched, and all the lessons I've learned. I think about the industry I've disrupted, the norms I've challenged, and the expectations I've exceeded. My impact on the industry is cemented now. People talk about me, my success, and my determination. They talk about how I refused to let anyone bring me down, how I fought for my dreams, and how I made them a reality. But more than that, my message continues to inspire others. I've become a beacon of hope for those who feel like they don't belong, for those who have been told they're not enough, and for those who have been left behind. I've shown the world that anything is possible, no matter who you are or where you come from. I've shown that success is not just about achieving greatness, but about lifting others up with you. As I look to the future, I know that my legacy will live on. It won't just be about the money I've made or the businesses I've built. It will be about the lives I've touched, the minds I've opened, and the hearts I've inspired. I may have started as just a rejected candidate, but I've become so much more. I've become a symbol of hope, a reminder that we all have the power to create our own destiny. And as I leave this chapter of my life behind, I know that my story will continue to inspire others to take control of their own lives, to chase their dreams, and to never let anyone bring them down. My legacy will live on, and I couldn't be prouder.